I always wanted to write from a very early age. I suppose partly because whenever I wrote something in grade school, the teacher always thought it was quite good and encouraged me. And also I had been named after Edgar Allen Poe by my father. He liked Poe's work. Actually, he liked a lot of bad writers, but Poe is our greatest bad writer, so that's some consolation. A couple of years before she died, I finally got up the courage to wonder about that name and that choice. And I said to my mother, do you and Dad realize you named me after an alcoholic, drug-addicted, delusional paranoid with strong necrophiliac tendencies? And she said, Edgar, that's not funny. At any rate, by the time I got to the Bronx High School of Science, I found myself, it was very uncomfortable. Found myself in classes with incredibly, insolently smart, Bronx Science was an all-boys school then, and all around me were these kids going around, in some cases predicting, in some cases correctly, that they would win the Nobel Prize in physics someday. So you can imagine how difficult that was for me. So there was a chance to take an English course in journalism. And I went after that course just so that I could write. And it was pretty boring learning how to be a reporter, but then we had an assignment to do an interview. And I went to town on that. And I turned in an interview with the stage doorman at Carnegie Hall, who was a German Jewish refugee who'd barely escaped from Hitler. His name was Carl. He was a gentle old man, and we'd come to work every evening in his baggy trousers and mismatched jacket, and a paper bag with his lunch and a thermos of coffee or tea, probably tea. And he would drink the tea by putting a cube of sugar between his teeth in the old world style and drink the tea that way. And all the great musicians adored Carl. He was very knowledgeable about the repertoire, and people like Toscanini and Horowitz and Jascha Heifetz, and they all greeted him warmly whenever they were doing a concert there and called him by his first name, Carl. So I turned that interview in to the teacher, and she called me the next day and said, "This is the best interview I've ever had coming out of this class. It's so good, I think we ought to run it in the school paper. And we need a picture of Carl to go with the story. We'll send one of the photography kids down to Carnegie Hall to take his picture." And well, I hadn't expected that kind of reaction from my teacher. And I said, "Well, I don't think it's possible to do that." And she said, "Why?" I said, "Well, Carl is very shy." And she said, "Shy? Well, he talked to you, didn't he?" And I said, "Well, not exactly. There is no Carl. I made him up." And I thought it was so much more interesting, than going through the tedious business of finding someone to interview. And if there wasn't a Carl, there should have been.
This has been a long life of writing for you. Is this what you had expected? Did you have any expectations? Do you think this is what I wanted to be for all these decades?
I think it occurred to me at about the age of 9 that I wanted to be a writer, because by then I was reading everything, and I decided, as if I was putting on some sort of cloak, that I was a writer. And I didn't feel it necessary for many years to actually write anything after that. but I did, I did read, and I was fortunate. In my generation, television came along a little later, and growing up in the Depression, there wasn't much money in the house, but there were a lot of books, and my mother and father were both readers. My older brother, we had books and we had music. My mother's a pianist. My father was running a record, something of a musicologist. He had a music store down on 6th Avenue and 43rd Street. So there was always music, there were always books, and it was very easy to slip into that identity and to discover when you were reading, not only that you wanted to find out what was happening next, but having this other line of inquiry in your mind says, how is this done? And I think when a kid is going to be a writer, that line of inquiry will occur.
You have a new book.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little about it and read something from the new book?
The new book is called Homer and Langley, and it's loosely, very loosely, freely based on the Collyer brothers. I don't know if it means anything. Collyer brothers were these strange, reclusive eccentrics who lived in a house on Upper Fifth Avenue, and they had money, but they did scavenge in the streets, and over the years filled their house with enormous numbers of things and a lot of junk. So I happen to have a couple of pages here, and I'll read. There are two brothers. One is named Homer. He's the narrator of the book, and the other, the older brother, is Langley, and that's the name of the novel, Homer and Langley. I'm Homer, the blind brother. I didn't lose my sight all at once. It was like the movies, a slow fade out. When I was told what was happening, I was interested to measure it. I was in my late teens then, keen on everything. What I did this particular winter was to stand back from the lake in Central Park where they did all their ice skating and see what I could see and couldn't see as a day-by-day thing. The houses over to Central Park West went first. They got darker as if dissolving into the dark sky until I couldn't make them out. And then the trees began to lose their shape, and then finally, this was toward the end of the season, maybe it was late February of that very cold winter, and all I could see were these phantom shapes of the ice skaters floating past me on a field of ice. And then the white ice, that last light went gray, and then altogether black, and then all my sight was gone, though I could hear clearly the scoot-scut of the blades on the ice, a very satisfying sound, a soft sound, though full of intention, a deeper tone than you'd expect made by the skate blades, perhaps for having sounded the resonant basso of the water under the ice. Scoot-scut, scoot-scut. I would hear someone going someplace fast, and then the twirl into that long scratch as the skater spun to a stop. And then I laughed, too, for the joy of that ability of the skater to come to a dead stop all at once, going along scoot-scut and then scratch.